Dr. Jessica Shepard, I am so happy to have you here on the Energize podcast. How are you doing?
I feel energized now that I see your face, and really just a pleasure to spend time with you. I love when we were able to meet a few months ago, like in person. I think that was just like a really fortuitous moment. And now we're here again.
Now we are here. Yeah. I mean, I was beyond delighted when I saw you around the corner at Rosie Acosta's home, like of all places,
I know it was kind of like this coming together moment that was necessary and needed for the three of us. And I enjoyed it thoroughly.
I know that you've worked with thousands of women over the several years that you've been an OBGYN and an advocate for women. And you've lived this journey in your own skin.
Yeah.
What has been one of your personal wake-up calls, or maybe it was one personal wake-up call, kind of that defining moment when you realized menopause was more than just a hormone shift?
Yeah, for me personally, as much as I talk about it and know about it and explain it to patients who come into my space, was I would think two things. One is cognition, the ability to remember, retain, multitask, those sorts of things. It took me a few months to kind of pin it down and being like, I think this is what's happening.
I related to that so much because it has been so destabilizing.
Oh, I know. And then the second thing was in my own personal life and relationships is seeing how kind of the transformation of who you are, how you feel about yourself, the things that become important, the things that are less or more tolerable started to show itself in my own space, in my own life. Yeah.
I deeply relate to that. One, it's one thing to talk about it and to show up for patients every day for years. It's another thing when it happens to you.
Yeah.
And how you recalibrate as a result. Have there been, in this journey of midlife, are there any beautiful lessons that you feel like you have walked away from or walked away with as you navigated this, especially as you are ascending into I would say you're even in ascension right now, even more so. And there's a lot of hard-won lessons and a lot of hard-won successes. How does that feel navigating all of it? What have been some of those big wins and lessons?
Yeah, I think some of and I'll start with the way you'd worded it, first was, what are the things that you walk away with being like, this is actually a beautiful journey. And I think that is truly looking inward to look at this transition and the aging process, kind of both, but all in the same, is we get to define it. We get to decide how we want to show up for ourselves in that process. And I think that has been really important for me because that can be how we're showing up physically, obviously because there's changes hormonally, but also emotionally and metabolically, right? And I think before, how you thought of aging was just like, oh yeah, you age and then your body just declines. And I think quite the opposite now is I actually get to be in the driver's seat a little bit more than I thought.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. Yeah, that there's so much more we have control over that we were not led to believe.
No, even in the health space, when I think of health in general, right, chronic disease and things that people typically get as they age, when we think of risk factors or things that are more commonly occur as we age, is we actually now have the ability to either decrease that risk, prevent, or from an epigenetic standpoint is really change that intricate DNA structure of what we think of aging. So I'm fascinated by the science that we see in longevity, but also, bringing it back to menopause is the beauty of hormones and what they can provide and how they align your health track, your lifespan. Yeah.
I love that. I would love, in all the research you've been doing and also in all the recommendations you've been making, and again, walking this path as well, what have been some of your non-negotiables in terms of health habits? I see you working out at the gym, getting in where you fit in. I see you, eating the protein, the fiber, the healthy fats. What else are some non-negotiables for you? And if you want to extrapolate on those as well, by all means.
Yeah. I think that non-negotiables are your individual care, when I say individual care is to neglect it, right? I think it's actually sometimes easy to neglect your own health, playing a part in, I think even if you think of the healthcare system, it has created us to be creatures of we wait until we need the thing and then we'll go get it. And typically that means I'm gone from healthy to ill or sick. And I think having agency is a non-negotiable. So not really dialing into what responsibility you play in your health is a non-negotiable.
Oh, I agree with that. Yes, I agree. Agency, and it's the first step in making those decisions. And then I want to talk about the book. In your book, Generation M, you talk about redefining menopause. I love the book. It's so beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
You talk about redefining menopause for this generation of women. What does that redefinition look like? And why is it so needed? And I feel like we've touched upon it, but I'd love for you to kind of talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think when we think of women's lives, they're kind of like staged in hallmark timeframes, which is like puberty, getting your period, pregnancy, menopause, right? And they're very like definitive, and this is what you will go through health-wise when you get there. What we haven't really discussed for the menopause journey is this really evolves into the latter portion of your life. And so in the book really was to ascribe to all the different transformations that occur, even from the touch point of estrogen and progesterone are not just sex hormones or in your pelvis. We have receptors for that all over our body, including the brain, the heart, the muscle. And so when you really see the impact of estrogen and progesterone and how those hormones impact our whole body, that's where you start to kind of tune into as I go into that transition or that phase of my life, this is not just I don't get my period anymore phase. This is now impacting my brain, my bone, my muscle, my heart, my thought process, my emotions. And so that's how I really wanted the book to live, is for people to read through it and being like, wow, this is a guidebook for my entire body and also my life. Like we speak a lot about mindfulness in there, or brain health and how to work on cognition, sexual intimacy. And so those are features of life that typically were never really kind of connected with the term menopause. It was just like, stop your period and that's it. And so I wanted to breathe some life into it.
I love that. And you're right. It was always kind of these punctuations of how we define this. And it didn't open the door for what you described really as some of the bigger silent shifts, the big physiological shifts that happened that weren't on women's radar until...
Oh, no, not at all.
Until they were in their 60s.
Oh, by the way, 20 years later, here's what may happen because you went through menopause. And you're like, oh, thanks, 20 years later.
Exactly. You're like, why couldn't I have known about this beforehand? Like when I was really symptomatic, like when I was really feeling it, like, why wasn't anyone having this conversation with me? I'm curious, there's a myth that I've been looking to dispel. And one of the myths that I am looking at is that, I hear a lot about perimenopause being a zone of chaos. And I agree. Goodness knows I'm in perimenopause. I think you are too. And there are definitely moments where I'm like, this feels a little chaotic. But then it's the way that it's talked about is that it's just this blip in time and everything's going to settle out. And I find that it can be a bit dangerous because, again, when we are experiencing this cacophony of symptoms, often those silent shifts are developing as well. Those symptoms are leading to future health outcomes. Kind of brush under the rug, like you said. And then 20 years later, we're like, oh, by the way, what would you love women to know, particularly in the perimenopause transition, to be on the lookout for in terms of their overall health span and longevity?
Yeah, I think that the perimenopausal space is kind of like, I always use the analogy of a car. And in the perimenopausal space, it's kind of like when your tank, the indicator comes on and says that you have low gas. And as you see that signal, the goal is that you're like, let me go refuel. Let me use this opportunity to go refuel. And I really think that the time frame of perimenopause is that time to start getting some things in place to refuel, i.e., changing your diet, incorporating more protein, but also fiber, looking at what you may be depleting in to refuel. Looking at now, okay, my muscle mass is really going to start to take a hit in a few years. Let me start building muscle to prepare for that. And then obviously the biggest shift that we've seen in the last 7 years is I'm going to pay attention to my hormones based on this estrogen, progesterone change and shift in the ratios, right? They're just like erratically doing this. When before in reproductive years, they were very fine-tuned, they knew what they were doing. And now they're just kind of all over the place, is the beauty of saying, I have access to hormone replacement therapy or menopause hormone therapy. Let me utilize that as well to help refuel and reset in that phase of perimenopause.
I wholeheartedly agree. Is there a time where women should begin the conversation from your perspective about hormone replacement therapy? Because I would say that the messages are still very mixed.
I think that, it's not widespread. You and I know, right? You and I know.
Oh, look at that. Yes.
You and I know that there's a change in how we approach this, a change in how we're educating and what's coming out in science and data, but it's not widespread. So this is not something that all of our colleagues typically know and or relay to their patients. So, and I'm saying that with giving them grace, not, in a shaming way, is that I think that we have really changed the perception of what it means in that transition from perimenopause into menopause, and making sure that people understand it's almost like this gradient effect. It's not a hard, we're in your 40s and nothing's happening to your 50s and now everything's gone. And so I think if we can change that messaging, one, to help people understand it's a whole body, mind, body experience, and that it comes over the course of time. So we really have the opportunity to change the algorithm of what our body does in that time of perimenopause, which could last anywhere from 10 years to like 11, 12. You know what I mean? You don't know when you start. And it could start as early as your late 30s. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a decade for many. I cannot tell you how many patients of mine, friends, colleagues are like a full decade. That is what.
Yes. Yeah. I have, if you think of like, I have some patients, granted, I didn't really maybe know their journey in the perimenopausal phase, but that are like 55, 56 still having periods, right? And so you're like, how long have you been doing this perimenopausal shift? And now you haven't even hit menopause. So I can only imagine.
Yeah. And shout out to them in their mid to late 50s with reproductive longevity. Like, yeah.
I know. It's like a good thing and a bad thing. You're good that your ovaries are still able to give you like that endogenous estrogen. You're like, but the slight chance you got pregnant, you'd be like, oh my God.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And thank goodness. I mean, again, in terms of, educating around that, you do. It was definitely widespread. There's options there as well. I tell a lot of my community members is when your symptoms are affecting your quality of life, like you don't feel like yourself anymore, I think that is the time to initiate the conversation.
The conversation starts the moment you're like, Exactly. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to start hormones then, but I always encourage my patients, this is a great kind of landing ground on when something may have started. Doesn't mean we have to start right away with hormones, but as it starts to progress, that's a good way to keep track of what's going on until we get to the point that you're like, you know what, let's start.
I agree. I agree. And it's going to be different for every woman, depending on where.
Every woman. Yes.
Let's talk about that N of one, every woman. I know there's a lot of generalities around perimenopause and midlife and how they should navigate. How are you looking at this from that, every woman is unique. Like some women have young children in their 40s. Some women have kids going off to college in their 40s. Careers are different. Symptoms are different. There's so many things to be taking into account.
I think that I want to put the good charm on it. You and I, as we practice medicine, right? We usually practice it how we were taught, which is for good reason. We were taught the worst case scenario, meaning an illness. And so that's how we are trained, is to wait until something catastrophic happens because we can fix it. We are great fixers. Where I think that conversation has changed is when you think of longevity, right? As we have started to live longer, we have not accounted to how to live well longer. And the N of one is to start that conversation of how do you want to live well longer? And let's start now. And that's why everyone shows up differently as far as like what their symptoms are. I have some people who get into their 50s or, pass into the menopausal transition, like don't really have a symptom. I'm like, shh, don't tell anyone. It's like 70 to 80% of women going through menopause will have a symptom. So those like 10, 15, 20% that are floating out there, I'm like, shh, don't say anything. But everyone walks in with a different symptoms, different severities, intensities, combinations. And that sometimes is hard because as women, typically nothing's really happening. No, I'll just grin and bear it. And the problem with that is two things that I'll list is that then we get to where I was talking about traditional medicine, then we get really bad with the symptom or ill, then we're trying to fix it, right?
Now we're in a system of pathology and we are trying to retroactively, yeah.
And the other problem with that is inherently that women usually will set themselves on fire to warm everyone else up. I want to really change that narrative of what we do for our health, how we think of ourselves in health, and starting those conversations earlier.
I want to talk about the neuroendocrine transition. Because I think that a lot of women don't realize how big of a role these hormones are playing on the brain and vice versa. Women feel, I always think about those women who they're not symptomatic. And I'm like, what about your brain? Are you sure your brain that and then acting up a little bit? This has been for me and for so many of my patients, probably the most destabilizing aspect of perimenopause. I cannot tell you how many times I'm cheerleading my brain to for a conversation.
When you say, so I'm going to ask you a question. When you say show up for a conversation, are you talking on the aspects of like kind of cognitively or emotionally, kind of that capacity? Emotional, like cognition.
Mental energy, capacity, cognitive energy, significant research, and word recall.
I've had word recall days where I'm like, it's like, there's a word coming. I don't know what it is. And then I would say one of my biggest features that I've seen that have shifted in cognition is the ability to multitask. That used to be like my superpower.
Superpower, Jessica. Like it's an identity shift.
It really is. I could manage the world and more in one day in an hour time frame. And I was like, got it done. And now I'm like, it's like juggling and all the balls fell and you're like, oh, well.
Well, I think about even a day like today where both of us are creating a lot of content. I don't know how many interviews you're doing and you're juggling all the other things, but I don't know how many holiday events and parties and all the things that are going on that you are navigating. I have sick people in my household, so then that's into at the same time. So I had actually done a good job of passing things over, delegating, but then everyone got sick. And so in terms of the 100 tabs that you were able to just knock out, and I don't know if you're similar to me, but I really thrive in accomplishment. Like I love seeing the boxes checked. That is a good thing for me. How has that shifted? How have you reconciled that? While again, still, I mean, from the outside looking in, you look like you are checking those boxes. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I actually had to do a real check on myself personally in the last year and really honestly asking myself, okay, you're able to do that, but are you doing the best thing for yourself by doing that, right? And so the way that I kind of reconcile that in myself is, again, because I'm a doer, accomplishment, check the box, get it done, is taking pause and saying, of all these boxes, do all of them really need to be on the list? And being okay with that. That was a very hard transition because in my head, it was always, they all need to be done. And I would say over the last year, I've been like, okay, some of these actually don't necessarily need to be on my list. And that goes again to a lot of what I was saying, setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm, was I had things on the checklist that really were either not my responsibility. I had assumed role of that and responsibility of it with it not necessarily needing to be mine. And I think that's when you start to see, more articles and Instagram posts about like this emotional capacity and tolerance is when women are like, I just don't even care anymore, right? It's kind of that shift of being like, in a way where it can be gratifying of being like, I don't need to carry that anymore, versus the other side where you're just like, I don't give two. Like, where is the middle ground in between that?
Yeah, I think we all get to discover that for ourselves, but I do believe that that's a part of this journey. That is, again, getting discernment.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's such a hard message. It sounds so easy, but even when I say that to myself, I've gotten better with it. But before I was just like, no, I have to do it. No one's going to do it as good as me. No one's going to do it as efficiently as me. And it's my response. No, it's not.
I feel like it's the lesson for the ages.
Yeah.
For so many women out there.
A lot. Yes. Take it off your plate. Take it off your plate.
I want to spend a little bit of time, especially on that emotional bandwidth. I've heard you recently on Insta really go into this, and women
Yeah.
want more of it.
It's kind of an ode to my personal life, but also for the personal lives of women that come into my office every day. When I really realized what I wanted to move into, which was more of midlife medicine and longevity, was after doing like 15 years of academics, is I really realized women, especially, obviously, as an OBGYN, when they came into the office, whatever they were coming for, a well woman, a problem visit, a surgical consult, the issue is there, which is what they were coming for, but there's so much more wrapped around it. And I really realized that in order for me to really help my patients, I needed to allow their stories to unfold in a way where it became mind-body medicine. And how can I help them in that journey? Not to say that I'm a therapist or a psychotherapist or, a psychiatrist, but at least hearing that part of it so that I can direct them to where they need to go, because that needed to be settled as well.
Well, I think more than anything, I just want to give you just kudos for the deep compassion and the understanding and just meeting your women where they really need to be met, even if they don't know that they need to be met there.
Yeah, I think that was another thing I realized, is that women did not know that they needed to connect to that part of them as a part of their actual physical health, right? Like, we very much disjoint here emotions to our body. And it was like, how do I create that? And how do I allow people to look outside of the scope of medicine, meaning that hammer nail approach? I have a disease, you fix it. I have this condition, you give me a med. Or, like moving out of that structure. And this really allowed me to do that. And I think that my patients have benefited from that in themselves and seeing like, oh my gosh, I can really assume the responsibility of taking care of myself, mind and body.
And yeah, that goes back to the agency piece
Mm-hmm.
out in the beginning as a non-negotiable.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things I've heard a couple times from you, whether it was Rosie's show, but somewhere else as well, is the conversation around connection and community and how that's played a really important role for you and how it's been very intentional for you, at least this past couple of years.
Yeah, that really has changed again the scope of who you think, where you think you need to be, who you think you need to be with. Tolerance, we talked about that a little bit as well, but really shaping this change in our lives in who gets to journey that with us, right? Like, even as we met in, that time frame when Rosie, you and I were together, we really like kind of narrowed down that on connection. And, Rosie is, for anyone who's listening, Rosie is our mutual friend, but she really like kind of harnesses this connection out of people. And that, I adore her for that. And I think that if more of us can feel that sense when we're around people, I think that we would be better connected, we would be healthier. And I found that that has worked well for me, is really, really being intentional with the energy that I surround myself with, as far as within community and connection, but also allowing people to, I guess you could say, explore community. I mean, we are humans, and I think by routine we feel, whether it's been told to us, we met these people a long time ago, whether it's family, religion, that we can only do something a certain way, and that creates a lot of inflexibility. And the more flexible we are to, as we evolve, which we all should be, who evolves with us, who's moving with us, and who might need to be left behind. And that is an important part of community. And sometimes people are not in the community they need to be.
I agree with you. Have you found that your community has shifted even in this midlife journey?
Yeah. And that was surprising to me, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you did a bad job with the community before. It's just that in this phase and stage of my life, which is really profound, I really am humbled by experiencing perimenopause. And, when I obviously started as OBGYN, I was much younger. And so because the experience had not been there, you couldn't really speak to it. I could speak to about physiology and biology of what happened.
Here's the changes that happen. Here's the symptoms to be looking out for. Yeah.
I can draw it out. I know what goes up, what goes down, what the reference range is for this hormone. But the experience, I couldn't tell. And now going through, you are very humbled, and you realize that I have had to see that shift in myself. and what comes with that. And I think that has changed my community and how I take in information and how I choose to spend my time, meaning both time with people and who are those people.
One of the things that I have found to be a kind of a longevity hack that I'm loving, I'm curious what your thoughts are, is building community around movement. So I was curious, yeah, I feel like I've seen this playing out for you big time.
Yeah. I think it's really what they know in studies is as we age, our body, like biologically, wants to slow down, will be fine in isolation. It kind of like pulls away from community. So it's something that you actually have to lean into and push yourself back into it. And movement is obviously one of those ways because as we become more isolated and less movement, that impacts our body, right? Our functionality, our stability, our posture, our muscle mass and bone. And so all of those play into, again, how do you want to show up later in your 70s, 80s, and 90s? And so I think community and movement is exceptionally important, kind of giving a nod to the blue zones is one of the things that they've seen. And actually, Mark Hyman has alluded to this as well. And I think it's been seen in studies is that community itself and connection is an actual indicator of morbidity and mortality. And so I don't think we place enough importance on that because sometimes we focus a lot on the physical aspects of health, but not community and connection and also movement too.
Yeah, I love the combo. I think we're moving away from women drinking wine, after dinner together to hiking together, wine in nature together, like we can build our lives around community. And I think you're absolutely right, regarding the blue zones is that a lot of those communities, they're just physically active. They're just always moving.
Oh, that's really what the tenets were, where they looked at centenarians and basically it was the cities where you had to go buy your produce, where you had community and where they had stairs, which means that there was active movement for these people, as much as they could 7 days of the week. It was built into their routine and habits of their everyday life. And that's what sustained them and kept them alive.
Exactly. Yeah. When you have to go down many, many stairs from your home to get milk, doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah.
You're going to stay healthy. Absolutely. I agree with that. We were in Cinque Terre a couple of years ago and we were walking up the stairs and as like residents who live there were going down to go grocery shopping or to go visit a friend and have a coffee. Like that was how you had to go down. There was no driving.
That's the thing is that there's no option, right? We have the option here of do we want the escalator or the elevator? I'm like, how about just stairs? Like, I think so. Now we drive everywhere. We have a lot more of those luxuries. And in those luxuries, unfortunately, decreases our mobility and movement.
I agree with you. Yeah, the convenience. I'm such a fangirl for one, but I would love to know about your evening and morning routine, especially with a schedule where you're traveling, you're on TV, you are speaking in engagements, what that looks like, not only, at home, kind of when you're more grounded in your amenities, but then also how you are pivoting a bit when you are on the road.
Yeah, I'll actually start with the travel because I'm like, if I can accomplish this when I'm traveling, then it's much easier actually to accomplish it at home, right? So in travel, one of the things that I always do is make sure that I'm either traveling in or have packed my running shoes and a pair of tights. I'm like, because even at the smallest thing, I can either walk outside, run outside. Obviously, when I check into a hotel, I'm always asking, where's your gym? I think that's so important to continue the routine when I'm traveling. So movement is important. I always make sure that I have some form of pre-packed snacks because we also know nutrition is so pivotal, but a lot of times in a rush and inconvenience of travel, what you grab, you're like, this is all that's here. And so if I have something that, whether it's a protein bar, whether it's, packed nuts, like in a little baggie or some fruit, that in an instance, I know I have at least a healthier choice of what I can nourish my body with. And then the other thing too is I would say, even in a moment where I'm traveling and I have very little time, I will usually, I would say about 90% of the time, do a 10-minute meditation in the morning. 10 minutes.
Yes. We all have 10 minutes.
We all have 10 minutes. Yeah.
I love that. So nourishing your body with snacks, having at least those non-negotiables to move, and having a beautiful mental reset in terms of a meditation.
Because there's a lot of that comes in travel that you don't actually factor into the time the wear and tear on your body, changing time zones, that impacts sleep. So there's a lot. And I think because I travel so much, I just forget about it. So taking mental note of that to make sure that these things are instilled so that you're resetting your body.
Yeah. The sleep is a big one.
Yeah.
Sleep will make or break me. Types of changes. Whew. I have been so disciplined. Do you have tricks or tips?
You know what I'm really good friends with Dr. Matt Walker, who is like a sleep phenomenon. And he lives here in Dallas and he gives such good points on travel. He actually has a really good routine for travel. I haven't even tried it yet, but I don't think I've mastered that well enough, but it's always on the top of my mind of prioritize your sleep even in travel. So I think I do need to do a better job at that. When I'm home, yes, I do a better job at travel. Unlike you, I'm just like, oh, but there are ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel, especially with the amount of travel I had this year and jumping time zones, that I just tried to get to bed as early as I could, to kind of make up for. But it was interesting. It's interesting to travel in perimenopause where, sleep is already, it can be elusive depending on the situation. And
Exactly.
yeah. So extra grace to you. And the last question I want to ask is, as we are stepping into this new year, into 2026, and this is coming out before 2026, like this is coming out next week, girl, what are you excited to call in? Like, what was magical about 2025 for you that you are delighted to bring into 2026?
Ooh, you asked me a loaded question there. What was I excited about in 2025 that I'm excited to bring into 2026, if I'm hearing you correctly? Yeah, this was actually one of those years that was great for me. I had some really, really high highs. I had some really, really low lows. What I did extract from it is the more that I was able to work on myself individually and become more resilient, I think that is what I'm excited to bring into 2026 is resiliency, is the ability to shift and move with our lives, with, in this instance, hormones, and what life brings for us. I think resilience is key, but many times we have to practice it. We have to be expanded to come back. And if we don't allow for that growth, then we are not resilient. And we know that mentally and emotionally and physically, the body is built to be resilient, but we have to teach it that as well. And so that's what I'm excited to bring into 2026 is resiliency.
Resilience. I love that. Ooh, it looks good on you. Thank you. All right, honey, where can we get more of you right now and in the coming year?
Yes. So in 2026, for anyone who's listening and watching, I am so delighted that you're here and being able to spend time with you. I think I am really, really happy that we were able to do this before the end of the year. I think that they can find me, obviously, with my book here, Generation M. You can get it on Amazon and you can get it at Barnes & Noble. But to find me is on Instagram is probably the biggest area that you'll find me is going to be Jessica Shepherd MD. So that's SHEPHERDMD. And then also Modern Meno. That's really where I dive into like really specifics about perimenopause and menopause is at Modern Meno.
Perfect. All right, I'll have all of that in the show notes as well. Ooh, the book. It's so good. And just so deeply grateful for this conversation and for you.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you as well.
Thank you so much for watching. Now, if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are ready to learn more about perimenopause and how to navigate with a lot of ease and grace, be sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can join our community. Don't forget to share this video with someone that you love, that you know is navigating the perimenopause journey as well, because they deserve to feel their best too. See you in the next video.